The key to my salvation and my ex-husband's damnation wasn't in a lawyer's briefcase or a secret witness's testimony. It was hidden in the lining of my son's dinosaur backpack. Ticking like a time bomb, only he could hear. I sat rigid on the cold, unforgiving wood of the courtroom bench, the sensation seeping through my thin blazer. My knuckles were bone white as I gripped the worn pleather of a purse I'd bought from a thrift store, the only one I owned that didn't have a broken strap. The air hung heavy and still, smelling of floor polish, old paper, and a faint, collective anxiety. Dust motes danced in the pale shafts of light slanting from the high, arched windows, each one a tiny, indifferent star in my collapsing universe. The low, merciless drone of Julian's lawyer was the soundtrack to my execution. Her name was Ms. Vance, a woman with a voice as sharp and sterile as a scalpel, and she was dissecting my life with surgical precision, holding up each trembling, inadequate piece for the judge to inspect. She has no stable income, Your Honor. Bouncing between under the table cleaning jobs, she declared, her heels clicking with sharp authority as she paced before the judge. The apartment, as you'll see in Exhibit C, is in a neighborhood with a crime rate 40% above the city average. Furthermore, the children's school has noted on 3 separate occasions that 7-year-old Leo has arrived with a lunch consisting of crackers and a single apple. Not neglect, perhaps, she conceded with a dismissive shrug, but a clear portrait of financial instability. Each word was a perfectly aimed stone, and I was too paralyzed to even raise my hands to shield myself. My own lawyer, a young, earnest man from the Legal Aid Society named Mr. Davies, whose suit seemed a size too big for him, rose to his feet. Objection. Your Honor, counsel is painting a misleading picture based on circumstances my client's ex-husband directly created. The judge, a man with deep-set, weary eyes, barely glanced at him. Overruled. Cite down. Mr. Davies. The gavel didn't even fall. The dismissal was so complete, so final, that it felt like a door slamming shut in my face. I forced myself to focus on a crack in the floor. Anything to avoid looking at Julian. He sat at the opposing table, the very picture of composed concern, his jaw set in a mask of regretful necessity. His suit was a deep charcoal gray that probably cost more than my rent for 6 months. He was the successful architect, the pillar of the community, the worried father forced to take this drastic measure to save his children from their mother's chaos. The lie of it all was so audacious, so suffocating. It felt like a physical weight on my chest. My mind, à traiteur's vaisselle, drifted back. I remembered the man I married, the one who existed before this cold stranger in the courtroom. He had been a whirlwind of charm and grand promises. On our 3rd date, he told me I was too brilliant to be chained to a desk. Your mind is made for creating, Elada, for building a beautiful life, a home. He'd murmured, in his voice, a hypnotic balm. Let me handle the boring stuff. The finances. Let me give you the freedom to truly live. Inos, who had fought for every scholarship and promotion, was so tired of fighting. I let myself believe him. I quit my marketing job, transferred my personal savings into a joint account he managed, and poured all my energy into being the perfect wife. And soon after, the perfect mother to Leo and then Mia. The transfer of power was a slow, insidious poison. It began with gentle suggestions. Honey, maybe let me handle the bills. You have so much on your plate. Then came the questioning. $150 at the grocery store. What did you even buy? I remember one specific Saturday, the memory still sharp with shame. I'd bought a new hardcover novel, a small $30 indulgence. He found the receipt. He didn't yell. It was worse. He sat me down, his expression one of profound disappointment. Elada, I'm building an empire for this family. For you, and you're spending our future on Stories. He made me return the book. I cried in the car on the way home. Not for the book, but for the sudden, stark realization of my gilded cage. When I tried to talk to my sister about my growing unease, he overheard. Later that night, he wrapped his arms around me. "I heard you on the phone," he said softly. "I know you're stressed. Don't worry her. We can handle our problems together. It's you and me against the world." He didn't isolate me with walls. He isolated me with his love. Then, when I was at my most vulnerable, pregnant with Mia and entirely dependent on him, he left. He didn't just walk out. He detonated our life. The joint accounts were drained. The credit cards canceled. A letter from his lawyer arrived a day later. He was filing for sole custody, citing my emotional instability and financial ineptitude, a diagnosis he had spent 8 years carefully engineering. "The truth is, Your Honor," Ms. Vance's voice sliced through my memories. "My client can offer a life of stability, of opportunity. A life Mrs. Hayes simply cannot provide." The judge looked from the mountain of glossy evidence from Julian's side pristine bank statements, photos of his sprawling new home, brochures for elite private schools to me. He saw my secondhand blazer, the desperation in my eyes, and the single, flimsy folder my outmatched lawyer held. I could see the cold, logical conclusion forming on his face. Wealth versus poverty. A sure thing versus a desperate risk. My love. My sleepless nights nursing fevers. The stories I invented at bedtime. The way I could calm Mia's tantrums with a song, those things were weightless here. They didn't appear on a spreadsheet. A wave of icy dread washed over me. I was going to lose them. The thought was no longer an abstract fear. It was a certainty. A physical blow that hollowed me out. My breath hitched. I felt a small, insistent tug on my sleeve. I looked down, my vision blurry with unshed tears. It was Leo. His face was pale, his eyes wide and terribly serious, fixed on me with an intensity that cut through my panic. He had been so quiet, drawing on a notepad, but now he was looking at me as if he held the entire world in his small, 7-year-old hands. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered a single, terrifying, earth-shattering question. "Mom," he whispered, his voice a tiny thread in the heavy silence, yet clearer than any sound I had ever heard. Should I show him the recording now for a split second? The world narrowed to the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears. A recording. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of his words. I looked into his eyes, searching for a sign that this was a child's fantasy, a misunderstanding. But there was no fantasy there. There was only a grave, steady certainty that chilled me to the core. A part of me, the terrified, protective mother, wanted to clamp my hand over his mouth, to shush him back into the safe anonymity of childhood. I wanted to pull him close and whisper, "No, baby, stay quiet. This is not your fight." To expose him to this ugliness, to Julian's inevitable wrath, felt like a violation. It felt like failure. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced, starved, and systematically broken, saw the desperate, terrifying glint of a lifeline. He wasn't just my son, he was a witness. He was the only one in this entire room who held a piece of the truth. My hesitation lasted only a heartbeat. But in that moment, an entire war was waged within me. I saw 2 futures, one where I silenced him, and we walked out of this courtroom defeated. My children handed over to their abuser, and another, a terrifying unknown, where I let him speak. I chose the unknown. I gave a single Braston, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the permission he needed. Leo slid off the bench. "Excuse me," he said, his voice small but miraculously clear in the suddenly silent room. Every head turned. "Ms. Vance stopped mid-sentence, her mouth slightly agape. Julian stiffened, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. The judge leaned forward, peering over his spectacles. "What is it?" "Young man, I have something for you," Leo said, his gaze fixed on the judge's bench. He started walking forward. I watched, my heart a wild drum against my ribs, as my 7-year-old son, in his slightly too big shirt and scuffed shoes, walked the length of that courtroom. It looked so small, so fragile, against the vast, polished wood and the towering figures of the lawyers. He clutched something in his fist. When he reached the bailiff, he uncurled his fingers. It wasn't a letter. It was a small, black USB drive, the kind you get for free at trade shows, with a cheap plastic cap. "My son would like to present this to the court," I heard myself say, my voice trembling but audible. Julian shot me a look of pure venom, mingled with a new, dawning panic. "This is ridiculous." "Ms." Vance sputtered, recovering herself. "Your Honor, this is an absurd procedural breach. We can't allow a child to introduce unknown, unvetted materials." "Silence, counsel," the judge said, his eyes never leaving Leo. He gestured to the bailiff. "Bring it here." The bailiff handed the drive up to him. The judge examined it for a moment, a curious frown on his face. "What is on this?" "Son, it's a talk," Leo said simply. "Daddy was having a talk with a man in his office. He sounded angry. I found this on his desk." A heavy, suffocating silence descended. The judge looked at Julian, then at me, then back at the drive. "I want to hear this talk," he commanded. "Now." There was a brief, tense scramble as the bailiff procured a court laptop. The speakers were plugged in, the volume turned up. The crackle of static filled the room before a voice emerged, Julian's voice. It was clear, sharp, and stripped of all the feigned concern he wore in public. It was the voice I knew from our darkest nights. "I don't care what it takes." "Mark," Julian's recorded voice said, laced with impatience. "Move the rest of the liquid assets to the Nevada Shell Company by Friday. I want my reported income for the last 6 months to look like I'm barely breaking even. We need to create a portrait of her as completely dependent, and my situation as modest. Modest but stable." Another voice. Presumably Mark, the financial advisor, murmured something indistinct. Julian's voice cut back in, sharp as glass. "Listen to me. The goal here isn't just to win. It's to leave her with nothing. If she has no resources, she has no legal recourse. She can't appeal. She can't fight back. The court will see a struggling, broke woman and a stable, concerned father. They will give me the kids. It's a clean-cut strategy. Make her look incapable, and the rest will take care of itself." The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was a living thing, vast and accusing. I stared at the floor, my whole body shaking, not with fear, but with a tidal wave of vindication. It was real. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. It was all real. I slowly lifted my head. "Ms." Vance was as white as a sheet, staring at Julian with an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. She looked like she'd been slapped. All the professional confidence had vanished, replaced by the dawning horror of a lawyer who has just discovered her client is a monster who has made her an accomplice to fraud. But it was Julian's face that I would remember forever. The color had drained from it, leaving a pasty, grayish pallor. His jaw was clenched so tight, a muscle jumped violently in his cheek. His carefully constructed mask of the concerned father had not just slipped, it had shattered, revealing the seething, narcissistic rage beneath. For the first time, in a court of law, everyone saw the man I had been living with for a decade. The judge slowly removed his glasses and placed them on the bench. He folded his hands and leaned forward. His eyes, no longer weary but blazing with a cold, clear fury, fixed directly on my ex-husband. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You have a great deal to explain." Julian opened his mouth, a strangled, croaking sound emerging. But the judge cut him off with a sharp, slicing motion of his hand. His voice, no longer quiet, boomed through the courtroom, imbued with the full weight of his authority. "I have heard enough. This hearing is suspended." Effective immediately, he leveled a stony gaze at Julian, whose face had crumpled into a mask of disbelief and rage. "Mr. Thorne, I am ordering a full, formal inquiry into your financial conduct based on the evidence presented today. Every document you have submitted to this court will be subject to a forensic audit. I am also issuing a temporary injunction, freezing all known personal and business assets pending the outcome of this investigation." Ms. Vance shot to her feet. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is highly unorthodox." "What is unorthodox?" "Counsel," the judge thundered, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings, "is a litigant attempting to commit a brazen fraud upon this court. You would be wise to advise your client to cooperate fully. Very wise." He then turned his attention to me, and for the first time, his expression softened, the weariness replaced by something approaching compassion. "Ms. Hayes, until this matter is resolved, you are granted sole, temporary, physical, and legal custody of your children. Mr. Thorne's parenting time is suspended until further notice. The court will reconvene when the investigation is complete. We are adjourned." He struck the gavel, and the sound cracked through the room like a gunshot, signaling the end of one life and the beginning of another. The words washed over me, but they didn't fully register at first. My mind, so accustomed to bracing for impact, couldn't quite accept the absence of a blow. Sole custody, investigation, suspended. I sat there, frozen, as the room erupted into a flurry of quiet, urgent activity. Julian was grabbing his lawyer's arm, his face contorted in a furious whisper. I could feel his rage from across the room. Apalpable. Toxic heat. I pulled Leo and Mia into my arms, burying my face in their hair, inhaling the simple, clean scent of them. Mia was confused, but Leo just leaned against me, his small body a solid, warm anchor in my swirling world. "You saved us," I whispered into his hair, my voice thick with tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. "Oh, baby, you saved us all." Leaving the courtroom was a surreal experience. We walked past Julian, and for a fleeting moment, our eyes met. I saw no remorse in them, only a cold, bottomless fury and a silent promise of retribution. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. The power had shifted. It was no longer his word against mine. It was his word against the truth, recorded in his own voice. A few days later, I sat in a small, quiet office, a cup of hot tea warming my hands. Across the desk sat a woman named Miss Inwide Shen, the court-appointed investigator. She was nothing like the lawyers I had encountered. She was in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, methodical demeanor that immediately put me at ease. There was no pity in her gaze, only a quiet, focused professionalism. "Elara," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to think back. The recording your son found is our starting point. But Julian's deception likely began long before that. Sometimes the smallest details can be the key. At first, my mind was a fog. Years of being told I was forgetful, paranoid, and bad with details had taken their toll. I don't know," I stammered. "He handled everything. He said I didn't have a head for numbers. He said that, Miss, Chen repeated softly. But what did you see? What did you hear? Names of business partners he only mentioned once. Trips he took that seemed unusual. Any odd paperwork you might have seen. She was so patient. She didn't push. She just waited, creating a safe space for my memories to surface. And slowly, tentatively, they began to emerge from the mist. A name, Kestrel Holdings, that I saw on a letter he'd tried to hide. A sudden business trip to the Cayman Islands he'd been vague about. The year before he left. A frantic late-night phone call I'd overheard where he'd hissed something about untraceable transfers. I remembered finding a small notebook once with strings of numbers. When I asked about it, he'd laughed, calling it brainstorming for a client's security system, and then it had vanished. At the time, they were just disconnected fragments, easily dismissed as my own paranoia. But as I laid them out for Miss Chen, she began fitting them together, a dark mosaic taking shape. Kestrel Holdings, she murmured, typing rapidly into her laptop. Registered in Delaware. A notorious black hole for corporate transparency. Over the next few weeks, Ms. Chen worked with a relentless, quiet efficiency. She was a digital bloodhound on a cold trail. The recording gave her the initial thread, and my fragmented memories gave her the direction to pull. She subpoenaed bank records, tracked IP addresses from encrypted emails, and unraveled a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts designed for one purpose: to make a wealthy man look like a pauper. Each update she gave me felt like a small piece of my stolen life being returned. She found the primary account in the Cayman Islands, holding a 7-figure sum that had been siphoned from his business over 5 years. She found proof that he had deliberately defaulted on loans to lower his credit score. All part of the charade. Julian's pristine house of cards, built on lies and intimidation, was beginning to tremble. One afternoon, Ms. Chen called me. "We've got it, Elada," she said, and I could hear a rare note of triumph in her voice. "We found the final wire transfer instruction, the one that moved the last of the marital assets out of your reach, dated 3 days before he filed for divorce." The instruction memo reads, "Finalize asset shield. We've got him. It's over." In that moment, sitting in my tiny, bare-bones apartment, I felt a strength I hadn't realized I still possessed. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed it was truly within my grasp. When I walked into the courtroom for the final hearing 2 months later, the air felt different. It was the same room, the same polished wood, the same high windows. But the oppressive weight was gone. This time, I wasn't wearing borrowed clothes. I had on a simple navy blue dress I'd bought with the first paycheck from my new part-time job as an administrative assistant. It was a modest victory, but it was mine. I stood taller. I met the eyes of the other lawyers. I was no longer the trembling victim. I was a survivor. And I was here to see this through to the end. Julian looked like a ghost of his former self. The expensive suit was still there, but it hung on him differently, as if the man inside had shrunk. His confidence had evaporated, replaced by a sullen, resentful bitterness. His new lawyer, a grim-faced man who looked exhausted before he even began, spoke in short, clipped sentences, making a few weak arguments about his client's previously upstanding character. It was a pathetic, last-ditch effort, and everyone in the room knew it. Before the judge could speak, Julian stood abruptly. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" he asked. His voice strained. The judge gave him a long, cold look but nodded. Julian turned, not to the judge, but to me, his eyes burning with a desperate, self-serving fire. "I did it for them," he said, gesturing toward Leo and Mia. "I did it all for them. Do you understand? I saw the life you would have given them. A life of scraping by, of second-hand clothes, of never having the opportunities they deserve. I built a world for them, a world of security and privilege. Yes, I moved money. Yes, I planned. I did it to protect them from your weakness, your inability to provide. I did what a father is supposed to do, everything in my power to ensure my children have the best possible life. The speech hung in the air, a monument to his own delusion. He truly believed it. He had twisted his cruelty and control into a heroic act of fatherly love. There was no remorse, no understanding of the damage he had done, only the profound, narcissistic belief in his own righteousness. The judge listened, his face an unreadable mask. When Julian finished, a heavy silence fell. The judge put on his glasses and read from the document in front of him. This court has reviewed the findings of the financial investigation, the evidence of willful non-disclosure, asset concealment, and perjury is overwhelming. The actions of Mr. W. Thorne were not those of a concerned father. They were the actions of a calculated manipulator, designed to inflict maximum emotional and financial damage on his former spouse to unjustly secure custody of his children. This behavior is, in a word, monstrous, and stands in direct opposition to the best interests of the children he claims to have been protecting. He looked directly at me. Ms. Hayes, in light of these findings, and your demonstrated resilience and unwavering commitment to your children under the most difficult circumstances, this court grants you full and sole physical and legal custody of Leo and Mia Thorne. My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't finished. Furthermore, Mr. Thorne is ordered to pay retroactive child support and spousal support, calculated based on his true income as determined by the investigation. All legal fees you have incurred will be paid by him. His parenting time will be limited to professionally monitored visitation, twice a month, pending the results of a court-ordered psychological evaluation. Finally, this court is referring the entirety of this investigation to the District Attorney's Office for criminal review on charges of fraud and perjury. The finality of it was absolute. The gavel fell, the sound clean and sharp. It was real. It was over. Mia squeezed my waist, and Leo's small hand found mine, his grip strong and sure. I knelt and wrapped them both in an embrace, the years of fear and tension finally dissolving into a quiet, profound wave of relief. 6 months later, life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours. We lived in a small but sunny 2-bedroom apartment. I was working full-time at my office job and taking online bookkeeping classes at night, slowly rebuilding the career Julian had convinced me I was incapable of having. There were still coupons and secondhand clothes, but there was no fear. The pressure was gone. The constant, gnawing anxiety that someone was about to take everything away had vanished. The apartment was filled with laughter and the smell of pancakes on Saturday mornings. Julian attended 3 of his monitored visitations. His resentment, a toxic cloud in the small visiting room. Then he stopped coming. I explained it to the children, simply, their dad needed to work on himself for a while, and they deserved people in their lives who would always show up. They stopped asking about him sooner than I expected. One evening, I found Leo at the kitchen table, concentrating on a drawing. I looked over his shoulder. It wasn't one of his usual helicopters or superheroes. He had drawn a huge, sprawling tree with thick, deep roots digging into the earth. Underneath it, our little family of 3 was having a picnic. At the top of the page, in his careful, 7-year-old handwriting, he had written a single word: growing. That's what we were doing. We were growing, slowly and steadily, away from the shadow of the past and into the light. The strength that got us here wasn't about money or power. It was the quiet, stubborn strength of a mother's love and the unexpected, fierce courage of a little boy who knew the difference between right and wrong. He chose justice when no one else would, armed with nothing but the truth on a tiny plastic drive. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of the quiet battles so many fight every day, please take a moment to like and share it. Maybe there's someone in your life who needs to hear that they aren't alone in their struggle. That even in the darkest moments, there is hope for justice and a new beginning. Leave a comment below and share your own stories of resilience. This isn't just a channel, it's a community for survivors, for fighters, for everyone who believes in the power of truth. Your voice matters here. And if you want to hear more stories about the strength of the human spirit, please subscribe. Thank you for being a part of this journey.